Howdy, welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be a little bit of a different video. Basically, what I want to do here is upload a conversation that I had with one of my friends, Neil. Now, Neil is a software engineer by trade, classically trained with a computer science degree. He has been a senior software engineer at a number of very big companies and is currently employed doing software. So we talk about AI, we talk about the impact it's got on his role, the impact it has on his daily life. And so, yeah, if you like any of these topics that we talk about here, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, and enjoy the video. This is a conversation with Neil. So, yeah, I mean, it's purely just taking what we're saying anyway, and I'm just gonna
Yeah.
upload it to probably YouTube or something like that, or I'll probably upload it to Constance to be completely honest.
Nice. Nice. I know I've been working on trying to write like the first few like blog post entries.
Yeah.
With the stuff going on at home, haven't really had a chance to like sit down and write. But what I found is a couple of weeks ago, I had to write a document for work. So like I
Mm,
had an idea that I wanted to pitch and sort of like sell to the higher ups.
yeah.
And I've been taking Cooper out for a walk ever since Karen can't. So the walks are like 45 minutes to an hour.
Hmm.
Um, and I've never used text, speech to text. Like, you think it's 2025, right? And you're like, how can it be the first time you've used, speech to text? And I'm like, you just I just never thought about
Yeah.
it. And what ended up happening is that on two of my walks, I just talked, right? Like what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, different ways to say it. I just kept talking and it just kept recording. Granted, the speech to text, some of it was just absolutely hysterical, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like every time you say Kubernetes, right, it's like Cooper is silly, or somebody is stupid, or
Yep.
somebody's getting neutered, and I'm like, okay, like I'm going back and reading it, and it's taking me a minute to like figure out what my thought process was.
Hmm.
Um, but it's kind of similar to what you're saying, right? Is that we're gonna have a conversation. If we can record it and share it, there's inherent value in that,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
right?
crazy that you're bringing up that use case specifically because I just spent all of last week building out a WebSocket integration so we can do speech to text on our front end. So it's serendipitous that you brought that up.
That's awesome. I would absolutely love to look at your code and walk through it with you to see like how you like designed it, and even like where you got the idea and how you learned about all of it.
Yeah, man. I
Um,
mean, we could definitely do that, especially like maybe even next weekend because I probably have it in production by then. But I mean, I just used the ChatGPT voice to text, and I was like, "Hey, I want to build something like that."
okay, okay, that's pretty awesome. A couple of weeks ago, I don't know how it is for you,
Hmm.
but like LinkedIn recruiters have just been blowing me up,
Yeah.
right? Like every week there's 4, 5 recruiters that reach out, right? And like not all of them, like, I don't really talk to a whole lot of them. Like I ask for the moon and then they just fall off, right?
Right.
Because what's the worst they can say is, sure, let's talk, right?
Right.
And you're like, okay. And so like one of those conversations, right? Like I asked for something outlandish, like benefits, pay, and everything else, and they were like, "Yeah, let's have a conversation." And I'm like, "Well, okay." Um, and so and then I was, in touch with DP at the time,
Oh yeah.
and I was talking to him because he's interviewing, and I was wondering how he's doing his research, and he's like, Chat GPT. He cracked it open, punched in the name of the company, and asked him a bunch of questions like he does, and Chat GPT produced like this deep research, right, and
Hmm.
sent it all my way, and I'm like, it is absolutely fascinating, right? Like that research was so helpful that could I have pieced it together eventually? Sure. But like, I sat back and DP said it took it like 15 to 30 minutes and they got back to it, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Like I could never do that. Like at least in 30 minutes, no.
Yeah, and it's got like really, and you can train it too, right? To be like, hey, I care about the reviews. I care about maybe this specific part of the benefits. Or I care about, what they do for, the last year's like layoffs or whatever it is. Like you can actually like define, I want this specific metric and have it just come back with that. That's
Yeah,
interesting. I'm glad that he's interviewing. I didn't know he was interviewing. I'm glad he is.
he is. He is. And he's doing pretty well, but he's enjoying the severance for sure.
Yeah, I bet. Jeez.
um,
Okay. So AI with like recruiting, I've seen that quite a bit. I've also seen just a ton of recruiters reach out to me with automated messages. I'm like, that was generated. I could tell that's generated.
yeah, right. There was an interesting post I had seen on LinkedIn where somebody has put punctuation at the beginning of their name. She's got a period there,
Hmm.
and she's like, as soon as I see that, I know it's automated.
It's a placeholder.
Yeah, and she's like, well, I just ignore those messages because there's no way you read this message before you sent it to me,
Right.
right? Because you would have known the period doesn't belong here. I thought that was an interesting take.
Hmm.
Um, um, I'm not being overrun by recruiters that much, so I'm not doing that. But um, no, AI has certainly been interesting for sure, right?
Do you use it in your day to day?
I have been struggling. So to be
Okay.
completely honest, I was so at my work, we got access to Copilot a little over a year and a half ago. And I was absolutely excited to get my hands on it and see what it could do, right? Because I mean the message across the world is that this is going to replace me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
As
this
a
is the
software engineer, yeah.
right, like this is the holy grail, right? Is to essentially replace me. And so I was curious, like, what does the competition look like? And so I started to dig in and I laid into it pretty hard early on. So at the time, I was doing pair programming on my team. And the engineer that I was paired with, he is a English major
Okay.
and he is all about prompt engineering, right? And so with my philosophy of you can learn from everybody, right? And he's a advanced engineer, so a junior, but hell, I can learn from him and how he's interacting with it. And if AI is going to be a tool, I want to learn how to use it.
Yeah.
So in a given day, I mean, there was like 1 week where we paired every day, and like we got like good solid 6 hours in every day. We did more in that 1 week than I think that I could have done myself in three.
Oh wow.
Right. So with him helping with the prompts and the commenting of the code, and my vision of what we wanted to get done, we blended the two, and we just plowed through like weeks worth of work.
Yeah.
That was really like eye opening for me, right? Because I don't necessarily struggle with communication like face to face. Written communication is a struggle, right? Because there's the tone that you can't really convey through text, right? But also like grammar, right? It's a lifelong battle.
Hmm.
Some people are great with it. I am absolutely atrocious with it. But what he taught me was talk to it like you would a colleague.
Okay.
Interesting concept. So the way that I was talking to him, and he's like, just talk to Copilot the way you talk to me. I'm like, okay, let's try that, right? And so not like I want to do this, right? But like start just talking about, hey, the next step is that I want to write a unit test for the input is this, the output is this, and it shouldn't worry about any of the integral details, right? Like just write this test. And we did, like we used it to write unit tests, like, and so unit tests were great because we could just start, you what's the word? Just cranking them out.
Yeah.
Because all we really had to do was give out the comments and it would write it. Yeah, we had to proofread it and so on and so forth. Long story short, a few weeks go by and I got burned really bad. So
Really?
I was working on something that was like for an incident, and like it was already the client was really hot because they had missed a deadline, and I'm trying to figure something out and get through the code, and I'm having Copilot help me like with little things here and there. And in .NET, there's a concept of a property, right? Like there's a getter and a setter,
Hmm.
and so the class had unit test. It's a legacy class, so I can't inject something in the constructor. But so like I was using properties to provide mocks, right? And so one of the properties I was like, for this, it was like a HTTP client, right, wrapped in another thing. So I'm like, create this, and in the setter, if it's null, like check to make sure this value is null,
Before
and then
instantiating.
right,
They were using it. Yep.
right. And so what it ended up doing was that it ended up checking the backing field to ensure it's not null before it would set the backing field. It's always null. And it took me almost 4.5, 6 hours to figure out that those 4 lines that it scaffolded for me were wrong. Because I'm like, why would that be wrong?
And it
Right?
didn't catch it, right? It didn't catch it on its own.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I that part, like I'm not that fluent with it, so I don't even know how to tell it to go look, right? But I'm like, I'm running the code, I'm running the code, the unit tests are failing, and I'm like, and it's like it's using poly and other layers of abstraction. And I'm like, in the unit test, the layers of abstractions aren't there. So it's like, after an hour, I'm like, I got to write an integration test so I can have this thing set up. And I'm like, fuck, get through all of it. And it turns out that the conditional before in the setter, the conditional is wrong.
Hmm.
Like it's all I wanted to do was ensure that the value coming in is not null, but instead it checked that the backing field is not null before setting the value. And ever since then, I have been extremely cautious of how much I leverage it.
So,
Um,
okay, like getting that specific bug replaced or fixed is kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. But would you have foregone that to give you that 3 or 4 weeks of sped up development time? Like to get to that point where okay, now this is the bug we have to fix?
so I think that if I'm not in a pinch, I can be patient and work through it. Right.
Okay.
If I was not in a pinch, I don't think we would have had it because I would have looked at the code closer.
Okay, so you almost feel like using AI to get that much speed caused you to have these problems.
Yes, because we come out of that week, right? And it's literally the next week is where I'm on incidents and I get this incident and something I think I got 2 incidents and on the second incident was a higher priority. So I worked on it towards the end of the week. I finally came back to this incident and the client's like, my deadline was yesterday.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay. So I was like, well, I can plow through some code, right? AI Copilot will help me and I'll get there faster. And then to get burned like that, because I was up till almost like two in the morning that day.
Hmm.
And when I finally figured it out, I was just like, I was cursing myself. I'm like, it's a property that you write all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I saw the if statement, and I saw the not null. I just missed the variable name, right? Instead of value, it was the actual backing field.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Wow.
so I'm like, oh my god, it was brutal.
That's very interesting. I'm almost curious, like if you were to like revert back to the commit before you fixed it and just like had Copilot be like, "Hey, I think there's a bug in here. Can you see if you can sniff it out?" I'm curious how that would have worked because I think Copilot would be at like you have it at like the repository level, right? It's got
Yeah,
access to all the files. That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's like probably the first time I've heard of somebody being burned on it after getting so much speed and
yeah,
efficiency gains. But I guess it makes sense, right? Like you don't really want to go back to something where you're like, I spent 12 hours working on this problem for a client and I could have solved it if it was just me working on it. But that's interesting, man. That's because with my experience, I've had like kind of what you said. Like I generate almost all my unit tests with an AI, right? Either it's going to be in the code and it's like with my files, or I copy the function I'm trying to test out to another LLM and say, hey, like given this framework, go ahead and generate me a bunch of unit testing. And as long as they pass, I'm happy. But I don't necessarily dive in to see like what it's actually testing. Um, it's a very interesting spot. Like I think we were talking earlier about the whole Shopify memo that came out that were like, all right, guys, like everybody has to use AI as the default from now on.
so the way I read it, right,
Yeah.
is that he's asking his engineers to ensure that they're leveraging the tools that are available to them
Yep.
to maximize their productivity, right? Um, and and I think that that is one of the best takes from a CEO, right, of what AI is doing for us. And
Mm.
instead of like, you hearing the stupid stuff about vibe coders and other shit,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like he's like, you guys are my guys, right? And now instead of leveraging Stack Overflow and various Googles, here you go. The level of productivity gain is massive, right?
Yeah.
Go back before AI. If you had a problem, what do? You go to Google. But we make fun, right? We say your Google foo needs practice. Like, when I graduated from college, I think one of my mentors was like, it's important to not only learn programming but also practice your Google foo.
Yeah.
And it was my first time encountering the phrase, and I'm like, I don't understand. And he's like, so you're going to run into problems, and instead of books, going to Google is going to be faster to
Hmm.
find answers. But you need to understand what you're looking for so you can target, use keywords, because Google's great at that, right? Picking out keywords and kind of adding a little bit of context. Fast forward to 2025, you got LLMs that understand my context, right? They have my code. I don't have to switch applications. It's literally right
Yeah.
there. And so it's like this thing right there. It's like a gigantic productivity gain that you're kind of leaving on the table if you don't use it,
Yeah. Yeah. I think
right?
I think it's 100% true. It's a little interesting to say that I guess, and I assuming he's targeting the technologists of the business, but to have AI as like part of your performance review, I thought was pretty interesting. I think it probably should be, but
How do you do that, right?
yeah, and that's the interesting part is like, how do you measure somebody's AI usage? Like, do I have to contribute a certain number of prompts a month? Like, do I have to do a report on how I used it? Like, that was an interesting spot. But I think
Yeah,
like overall, the sentiment's like, hey guys, like this is an important tool. You got to figure out how to use it, or at least default to that as the first choice. And then if that doesn't work for whatever reason, we can look at some of the classical alternatives, headcount, stuff like that.
yeah,
It's
for
very
sure.
interesting.
And that memo that from the CEO has sort of challenged a lot of like my preconceived notions about AI, right?
Why do you say that?
So, I have sort of sidelined AI to help me with documentation, unit testing. So I had even tried one time to write the unit test first, and then from there have it generate the code.
Mm-hmm.
It did really well, right? Like in that 1 week where I'm talking about gaining massive productivity, we had flipped the script and wrote all the unit tests first because we had all of the requirements, right?
Little TDD.
Yeah, kinda. And it did really well at writing the code. There was, one thing that it missed in terms of like adding authentication, like the bearer token
Mm,
to the HTTP. But there's nothing mentioned in the test about it, right? Like it's just a
right.
necessary detail, right? It doesn't fucking matter. So like it missing that wasn't really that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
But it was great. And so, but like I've sidelined it to help me with docs, writing unit tests, right? Like making sure like I haven't used the review the PR one yet. Like I'm curious what it'll do. Um, there are certain things that my team makes fun of me about.
Okay.
So like spacing, right? Tabs versus spaces.
Which one are you?
Tabs.
Okay, yeah, same here.
There's not a
Same.
choice. Like fuck.
Somebody's gonna be watching this and be completely triggered by that statement. That's hilarious. I'm also tabs, by the way.
So so we have this. So like my company is going through like a cloud native transformation.
Yeah.
So monolith over to microservices, right? So our internal tools team decided that they're going to make a microservice template. Well, some DevOps person generated the template, right? So not only does it use spaces instead of tabs, but it's two spaces.
Instead of four.
Yeah. And like I you know you're far like younger than me, right? But like when I review a PR, like I'm looking for certain things like unconsciously,
Yeah.
right? Like, and if it's not where like even characters, and I didn't realize this about myself, but like when the curly bracket isn't over another like four characters, right? I'm like paying closer attention.
Something
I'm
feels
like,
off.
yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
what is going on, right? And then the variable names, the like things are just goofy, and I'm like,
Hmm.
what is happening here? And like, it's like and it's a massive PR, but I am paying close attention to each and every line. And I mean, it took me forever to figure it out. Like, because like eventually I got through it and I pulled it down locally to test it. And I find myself like double tabs, and it's putting in four spaces, and I'm like, what is going on? Right? Like going off on a tangent completely
Yeah, yeah.
to realize that somebody has hard coded into the dev container two spaces for tabs.
Oh wow. So they like went into like the dev tools of the wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, you don't have to be an asshole about it, right? Like you prefer something, fine. But you're making a tool for engineers to use. Fuck your preference.
Yeah, right? That's hilarious.
And like to this day, right? I can't get them to change it. And
Really?
so I'm just gonna advocate to not use this thing. Like
Yeah.
if you build a tool that causes me an aneurysm, I'm just not gonna use your shit.
That's yeah, and it sucks when it's an internal tool
Yeah.
because then you're expected to use it. And it's like, well, we need to build software that we like internally if we're
Yeah.
gonna want to use it. So that's very interesting.
And it was funny when it dawned on me, right? And like I had this, like I raged pretty hard
I bet.
because I'm like, because like I don't know how everybody else does like reviews, but like I like I don't like var. I like
Mm,
explicit names, right? There are situations where I'm fine with var, right? Like if you've got the if you're doing var variable name equals new something, right? I can tell what the type is.
hmm.
If you're calling a method, I have no idea what the type is,
Right.
right? Because people name things like they're fucking turds. You like I don't need a sentence as a as a method name, right? Name it what it's doing or what its return value is going to be. When I'm looking at a PR in the web UI, I don't have any way to know what the fucking return type is going to be,
Right.
right? And so like I'm very particular about certain things because if I can't tell, and these things are learned right from over the years, right? Before, so after Rocket, I went to UWM,
Hmm.
and when I joined UWM, I was on the document document management's API, and when I joined, we would get this weird error, a Mars error.
Oh,
I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I think I might have heard about it, but I've never had to investigate or fix it.
So it's when something tries to open multiple connections to like the database, and the first connection has read a record, but you didn't close it. So you tried to read
Mm,
another record on the same connection, right? And so like it turned out that like everybody was like not familiar with async await.
yeah.
And the awaits are missing in methods, right? Like if you have a method that only has a return statement and then is calling another async method, skip the await, right? Don't make the compiler do that. Just return a task. That's perfectly fine. But as people started adding code to it, they didn't update the return statement.
Right.
So now you got a method with awaits and no awaits. And then some even went as far as to just omit awaits completely in the method. It's just like, like, and then it's all var and like I can't tell what it is. And like, I was brand new and it was one way that I made a name for myself there because I'm like, I found it and I'm like, we built a Roslyn analyzer to just go through and fix all of them, right?
Hmm.
Regardless of if it's a single line or not, just add awaits anywhere there's an async call.
Right.
Um, but then the next task was teaching engineers, right? How do I provide that feedback to AI, right? Coming back to our conversation,
Oof.
right? Like I
Yeah.
taught when an AI makes a mistake like that, how do I teach it?
Now, in this scenario, are you positing that it was the AI that made the mistake, or you're just supposing? Like in the future, how would you do this?
I've no idea, right?
Okay.
So in the past, like it was the lack of understanding on the engineer's part,
Right.
because one of the senior managers at the time was coding on the project,
Yeah.
and it was his fundamental misunderstanding that caused this problem,
Ah.
right? So like somebody had spoke up and said this is the right way, but he overrode them, and there wasn't a really conversation, right? So you really need people to not like look at titles when you're having a conversation about like technical stuff, right?
Oh yeah.
And if he's going to override you, he needs to be able to explain himself. It's not just that he's a manager and that's his call. Nah, dude. My like when that on call comes, I'm gonna get the call, right?
Right.
If I can be like, hey, listen, this call needs to go to you, fine. Then you can override me. Otherwise, we need to have a discussion. But
Yeah.
back then it was not only because like the project had been going for a year and a half before I joined. So it was re-educating all the engineers and my boss's boss, right? So there was a lot of like, I'm brand new, right?
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
are you trying to show people up? No, I just don't want to deal with this problem.
Right. And it
Uh,
sounds like at least somebody was aware that this could have been fixed. And so it probably wasn't like a mass re-education, but it just, hey guys, reminder, when we're doing async await, like remember your syntax here.
well, so when I was having a conversation individually with each of the engineers, right? One of them said, I had that conversation with said manager and
Right.
he overrode me. And I'm like, so it was also like re-educating him a little bit because he was so nervous that he had an inkling that he was right, but when the manager said we're doing it this way, he's like, I must be wrong.
Yeah, it's that it's part of that is like the corporate environment too can just beat you down and say, hey, yeah, he's got the title, he'll make the decision, and you really got to fight that because you get into situations like you just said where you're on call and
Yeah.
you're the one wasting, time with your family or stepping away from things that are important to fix the things that you're placating in the office. But
So this was 2019, right?
okay.
Fast forward to 2024 when we got Copilot. I've got engineers telling me, well, Copilot wrote that.
Oh geez. Blaming it on the co-pilot, passing the puck.
I'm like, did you like it took like I'm a pretty quick thinker on my feet. And like when I was asking him about his PR, and I'm like, talk to me about what was going through your head, like because like the code looks kind of awkward, and I'm like, we can solve this problem far easily with just abstraction, right? Because like we had a we had an interface that was describing essentially a connection to something else,
Mhm.
and in one of the methods, he essentially added in the ability to get the bearer token for the connection.
Fair
and I'm
enough.
like, and I'm like, you don't need this here, right? Like this can be passed in by another service, right?
Yeah.
Like you can use like the what do they call them, delegate handlers on
Oh, sure.
HTTP, right? And we can completely abstract it away. That by the time you get here, it's here, right?
Mm.
Right or wrong, it's here. And so like I'm curious why he did it this way, right? Because we had a conversation about using delegate handlers, and my thought was maybe he didn't understand it. Did he read it and didn't really put the two and two together? Or what was the problem in his understanding that like there's a gap here that I can fill?
Yep.
And he's like, well, Copilot wrote it. And like my brain is just like stuttering, trying to get words out because I'm like, that's not acceptable, right?
Right.
Like I'm gonna page you at 3 in the morning if I'm ever on call and this code is the problem. Like
Right.
I'm gonna get you up and then I'm gonna go to bed. You want to fuss at Copilot at 3 in the morning? If that's what you want to do, then that's fine, right?
Right.
But like having some semblance of that, right, is an interesting thought. And all the things you hear about vibe coders right now, it is absolutely hysterical.
So you
Uh,
don't believe it. You don't buy into the hype.
no,
You don't think you could
no,
vibe code an app?
no. I was I made a joke to somebody that in like 5 years I'm going to retire, and essentially I'm going to set up shop that says, "Hey, I will fix your application." Right? You don't have any engineers or developers on staff? No problem. Reach out.
Yep.
And if they tell me that their application was written by AI, flat out the door. Right? 6 months, $1 million. Every month after that, quarter of a million.
Oh, jeez.
Like we're going to make bank, right? Like let's go because you apparently have money to burn.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's if you got somebody that understands your business, great. If not, you're going to pay me money to learn your business so I can write your code correctly.
Right, right. That's
Um,
interesting. I do have on Constance, I did on my store, I do have a way that you can book time with me for a small fee so I can be your vibe coding coach. So if you're looking to be if anyone out there is looking for vibe coding assistance, reach out. Um, it's on my
Isn't
store, so.
so can we also offer my services that you can coach them and then once the project gets fucked, I can fix it for them?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
So I think what you're looking for is an ability to scale what we are doing, but have people that are proficient with what we do.
Okay. So you mean like
Um,
basically scaling AI?
no, it's kind of scaling humans, right? Like, so if
Okay.
you're vibe coding and AI is producing the code, it still can't produce hundreds of lines of code at a time.
It's getting there. It's certainly getting there.
No, no. So not I'm not doubting its ability to generate trash, right? Um,
Okay. Okay. So you mean
but
like coherent physical? Okay.
well, it's also our ability to review, right,
Yeah.
and piece things together. So when it generates a PR, it needs to be small, it needs to be concise, and it needs to be targeted, so we can review it and and approve or deny, right? But more than that, you have to have. I don't know if AI is going to be able to have like the conceptual model of your application while it's writing the new feature, right? Maybe you have to be the one to do that. And as the application grows and becomes unruly, you have to rein in the AI and say, no, this doesn't work for me, right?
Yeah.
Or you're going to do this is going to cause a problem elsewhere that we designed a couple of days ago. So like you know, I think you've seen the jokes. Bigger the PR, the quicker the approval. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Looks good to me.
small, smaller the PR, the more scrutinized it is, and I think that scrutiny is important.
Yeah.
Um, but I wonder, right? In today's day and age, though, in 2025, there is, or 2024 even, there's a culture of non-confrontation,
Ooh. Okay. Yeah. Double click on that.
right? People are not. People think that if you disagree with them, that you're arguing.
Hmm.
You're allowed to have a difference of opinion and disagree with an implementation on a PR. Now, if two reviewers, like AI wrote the code and two reviewers disagree on the implementation, who is the AI listening to?
That's true. Yeah. But also, I think calling out the environment in which you have to speak up, because I think we touched on that a little bit earlier, where it's like, hey, I know this is wrong, or I have an inkling that this is wrong, but I don't
Yeah,
feel empowered to speak my mind.
yeah,
Working on any
yeah.
team, that's super critical to have that amount of trust where it's like, hey, we can have disagreements here, and it's not gonna be an aggressive confrontation because I think that's what everyone's worried about, right? Is you're either seen aggressive or it feels aggressive, and it's that moment of like, oh, I feel uncomfortable that everybody shies away from.
Yeah, and the uncomfortableness I get, right? So, like, that's only one aspect of it. But, if you go back and look at what software engineers do, so when you were at Rocket,
Yeah.
how much of your time did you actually spend coding?
Um, it ebbed and flowed, to be quite honest with you, because we were doing some stuff that was pretty advanced for where the company was. There were times where we're stuck in a war room coding probably 70-80% of my time.
Sure.
And then there were other times where it was lower, probably 40 or 50%.
As you went up in your career, right? Like as your titles went up, like
Yeah.
you went from junior to senior, and I don't know if Rocket brought in a level after senior when you were there, but like as you went up, the value you were providing was not your code.
I think depending on who you talk to, you get different answers. But yeah, I mean, from the point I saw it, with a level of contextual awareness of the system that's being built and the system like that is housed within an organization that has specific infrastructure, there's a lot of domain knowledge I think that you bring to the table as someone who's been there for a number of years. So yeah, like to me, I was bringing in more knowledge than just the code, of course.
Sure. And then there's also industry standards, right?
Yep.
One of the things that we fight with on a daily basis at my job is we have our way and then there's the industry way, right? And the
Sure.
CTO is like, we're not special, so why are you coding it? Like, if you're worried about your job, there's other things to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Stop making internal platforms just so you have something to do.
Right. Right. It's like,
Right.
yeah, you're inventing the wheel just to say that really just to keep busy. And a lot of that's like, oh, I need to cover my own butt because I'm in a corporate world or in an environment where I don't feel like I own the thing I'm building.
Yeah, and so
But
like your top you're spot on with your domain knowledge, right? That says we're going to deploy this and authentication. We're leveraging industry standards of OAuth. This is where you need to go to get credentials to be able to allow your system to authenticate. Right? You need your client ID and secret so that way you can do the back
handshake and yeah.
exactly right, and your users can authenticate. But like, is AI asking for that? Like, is it helping you say, hey, do we have credentials to be able to allow users to authenticate with this particular um, provider, right?
Right.
Um, or am I, like when you set something up, like we were debugging something where we use Istio, right?
Sure.
And it essentially provides MTLS in our cluster.
Yep.
Now, you have to add a label or an annotation when you deploy something in order to take advantage of this.
Yep.
When somebody was creating a Kubernetes manifest and they didn't add this, so they couldn't talk. Nothing could talk to their service, and they couldn't talk out, right?
Right.
Because we've got communications outside of the mesh just disabled.
Sure.
So we're debugging, and it turns out it's this little thing that says Istio sidecar true is was needed to enable it to listen and talk. And it's like, is AI going to help you with that? Because
Right.
it doesn't understand that.
So, and that kind of brings me to the point of like, it doesn't understand it out of the box, and so there are obviously ways that we're using like RAG to put that context into the LLM so that it can actually respond with like, "Hey, make sure you double check that." Like when you guys are using RAG with Copilot, it's probably just has basic file level access, but then are you ever using an LLM where you have to like give it a PDF or a CSV or a kind of any kind of database for it to reason
Uh,
over?
no.
Okay,
Like anything we're doing, right? It's independent of data.
gotcha.
It's if it needs to know, I mean, I can define a database table, but the shape of the data I can give it, I can't give it real data because nine,
Security, all that fun stuff. Gotcha. And that's where like obviously it's a little bit I guess not as mature right now in terms of like I need to be able to run a 10 million context window LLM on-prem. For a bunch of companies really just can't do that. But I,
yeah,
I do see a future where that theory is possible, where you would have a state-of-the-art LLM that has 10, 15, 20 million tokens and that might be small at that point, where you can feed it the entire corpus of data that you guys have as an organization, and maybe you get some kind of new insights. Um, yeah, I think that's possible. I don't know how many years away we are from that because I think if I'm counting right, I think we're 24 months into 6 months away from being taken over by AI. So I don't know how many months it's going to take for us to get to, state of the art LLMs being run on prem. But in
yeah.
theory, I think there is a path forward where we could get to there.
I think I think it's great, right? LLMs and AI themselves are, I think, as a species as a whole, we don't really understand what like the differences between these terms.
Hmm.
One, like LLM is a form of artificial intelligence, but not all artificial intelligence is an LLM, right?
Right.
And I think that there is a misunderstanding of that. Um, LLM made AI come to the forefront, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was now it's the most consumer available product out there where it's like, yeah, just talk with your natural language. But we've been
Yeah,
doing AI since, the mid 1900s where it's like, I can predict, the next set of things, but it wasn't as consumer friendly as ChatGPT made it.
sure, right? But I think the misunderstanding that people have is that everything needs to be an LLM,
Right.
right? So I think that we're going to reach a very near point where there's going to be very focused models that aren't LLMs, right? But
Okay.
they're just solve a very particular task and just that task. It's not a general purpose model, but it's a model to solve a very targeted task.
Do you see these models be because like obviously today we have a classification model, computer vision model, right? Where it's like I can classify something binarily, one or zero.
Sure.
Um, there's stuff that's like okay, classification is just like a really easy example because it's stuff that we've been doing for a long time now.
Yeah.
Are you thinking that these new, specifically, I guess, tasked models are going to be more like natural language driven, or something where it's like, nah, it's going to be more programmatic, where I need to either send something over or do something where like a software engineer would need to be brought in.
So, um, maybe an LLM would help you create the more targeted model,
Okay.
like help you, it would help you lay out the steps to train something, how to build it, where to go, where to get the data, and things like that. And maybe, the new agent mode, right, even helps you
Yeah.
build one. But there would need to be probably, how do you expose it, right? And then how do you leverage a model that's very targeted? Um, and so I think a API way is one way, right? Like you have a web interface that somebody can call and leverage this thing. I think a way to monetize that is one option, right? And so I think the skills that a software engineer can bring to stand that up and to interact, I think that's where we're headed right now.
Okay.
And people are focused so much on replacing them, that they're missing the boat,
Mm.
right? That so like I this last quarter I had the opportunity to learn about AI and sort of like how do you build a model, and so like I took a crash course, right? So like
Yeah.
I'm I'm not even a novice. I just know that I live in a glass house and I can throw stones, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I'm gonna leave the experts are definitely, the folks that work at OpenAI and things like that. But from somebody who's a software engineer and has a very rudimentary understanding of a model building, these things are still probability under the hood,
Oh, of course.
right? And the probability comes from me saying it goes here or here, right?
Yeah.
You start with a binary decision and then you can make it, a ternary decision, and so on and so forth, right? And this is where the LLMs eventually come in, right? When you have your lexicological thing where you're just taking in the entire language and things like that.
Right.
But it's like, some of the pieces, like I'm walking through and learning about, like, like in the crash course, right? We were creating a email filter,
Sure.
right? Spam. And it's talking about how it's figuring out, using naive Bayes' algorithm, and then
Yeah.
tuning it to be faster so it doesn't get stuck, right? And I'm like, and I walk away from that course and I'm like, this is great information, but I don't necessarily want to go into machine learning, right?
Yeah.
As a software engineer, I want to enable my users and my company to leverage AI, but machine learning isn't something that excites me. Like I
Mm.
like it like statistics was never my thing. And I don't think you need me to go into stats to make the area field better, right? Like there's already tons and tons of geniuses that are smarter, right? And people are creative to use it. I don't think that the software engineers are going to be needed to facilitate this thing and
Mm.
and leverage it. But people are like, we're going to replace you. That's fine, right? When your ship breaks, I'm going to charge you millions of dollars to fix it.
It's very interesting because I think for me a lot of that fundamental like thought process is the jump between like hey this thing can put out an essay or a poem and that must have logic behind it and programming is just words and that has logic behind it so why can't it just do that and it's very appealing
Yeah.
just to be able to take that wrapper and be like, yep, we can just replace the other thing that uses natural language and all these other things that kind of are adjacent but not the same thing.
Well, I
Yeah, go
well,
for
I
it.
think the drive to replace software engineers comes from that we're expensive, right?
It's very economical if you can get rid of
And
because
we're
yeah, I mean
just
salaries are the number one line item at almost any good company.
right, and we're only getting more expensive,
Yeah,
right? And but like you can like going back in time, Google wiped out an entire like industry for generations, right? Like there's no more secretaries with the Google Maps, the emails, and no more telephones, right? The advent of the mobile phone. Who needs
Yeah.
a secretary anymore, right? You don't need emails or anything. But like, not talking trash about them, right? Like they served a purpose in our society, and they don't anymore, right? Like those people had to be re-educated to learn something else.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be like AI can solve a lot of mundane problems. I think that that leap is going to be really difficult,
For
right?
people who aren't necessary or who are currently working and then their job is going to get replaced.
Correct. Because it's not going to replace knowledge workers. It'll make them better,
Yeah.
right? It'll make them faster. But if you're not a knowledge worker, it can replace you because it can literally optimize what you do out,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because once we have a process in place, we can optimize it to remove steps, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, that's just the natural evolution of things.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like that part of the conversation doesn't get enough of the attention because it doesn't save a lot of money,
Ooh, okay. That's
right?
interesting. So you're basically saying that like if an engineer is making 200 grand a year, 250 grand a year, I mean, I might have five or six different people who are doing mundane data entry that,
Well,
I might much rather have those five or six people who I can bounce ideas off of and essentially look more busy than paying
yes,
this one person 250K a year. That's interesting.
but you can also, here in the state of Michigan, right? The median income is $40,000.
Right.
So if someone's making 250, that's literally six people,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And across the nation, I think it goes up to 50 grand, but still you're up to five people that, so it's like the holy grail, right? That we want to do this. And I think it will replace a certain portion of our field. There's a lot of people that join the field just for the money and not because
Yeah.
they have an aptitude for it. Yeah, I think those people are going to be in a world of hurt.
Yeah, I think so too. I also think it's going to be insanely, maybe not difficult, but very different for a junior engineer to then climb through the ranks to become that senior engineer. Especially when you have a bunch of non-technical people who think they now have all of this knowledge at their fingertips, which they technically do, but that's
But
all in theory.
but they don't, right?
It's in theory.
Exactly. And I think that that's I think the next challenge that we have to solve is how do we continue to encourage young people to come in the field, right? Because we need the people that are smart, right? Like
Right.
to push the field forward because that's who AI is going to learn from.
Yeah, and we need better training data. It's pretty obvious the AI needs better
Mm,
training data because it's not where it is right now. And if we stop producing that stuff originally, it's just going to be fed in with trash, and then
mhm.
trash in gets trash out. So
Yeah, I think the future is going to be great. I think people that are being Debbie Downers, they just need a dose of reality, right? Um, like things we learned at Rocket, they still resonate, right?
yeah,
Be good at your craft, right? Like if you're passionate about your job and wanting to learn and have a natural curiosity, it's going to take you far whatever field you're going in.
that's true.
We want these kinds of people in our field because they'll push us forward, right?
Yes, you want to be passionate about what you do every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the other I can remember a couple of months ago when I was setting off on a microservice project, right? And I had a junior engineer who just joined the company, and they're asking questions like, why do we care about this? Why do we care about this? And I'm like, well, think it through, right? One was, how do we authenticate into each of our multi tenants that we have? Like, I don't want to manage 1,500 passwords.
Right.
Like, the fuck? No. Like, I want one password. And yes, it's a security risk and we'll rotate it every so often. But, you know, and the question was, well, why do we need to access these tenants? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, right. So like the the innate curiosity they had made us challenge the norm that we were going through
Yeah.
because I was just following steps that I had done a couple months prior to set this up. Right, I need to be able to authenticate. How do I get to a database? this, that, and the other.
Right.
And our microservice doesn't deal with client data. So why do I need to go through this rigmarole of authenticating?
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging those assumptions, and you won't get that unless you're passionate about what you're doing. If you're just assuming that, yeah, Neil's a senior engineer, he'll just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
There's so many things that you can be blinded by in that.
And and I mean, the end result ended up being that we set up our own database, right? But we're independent of everything.
Right.
We have our own database release pipelines. We don't care when anybody else changes. I mean, life is so much better. Like, but it's the innate curiosity, right, that they had of learning what we were doing and why we were doing it that led to the conversation. I think AI is always missing that
Mm,
piece, the curiosity. Um, and I think if we actually do achieve artificial intelligence someday, I think innate curiosity is it has to be something that we expect out of that, right?
I think you're
Um,
exactly right. Curiosity is such a strong force. And it's a secret sauce in terms of like people who are passionate about their job or their craft are going to outperform those who are not every single time, right? Because you're going to be putting forth that effort where it feels like play. It feels like fun instead of,
yes,
oh, this is a chore, this is a job. So no, I see that quite heavily, especially like in my practical experience. And I think that's a really smart just insight that curiosity is missing from some of these models. That's awesome.
and I know we don't have a lot of time, right? So like we, I had Ben 3 years ago,
Yeah.
so he's three and a half now, and I sort of had my head buried in the sand about AI, and I'm like, it's a fad, it'll go away, right? Instead of really like learning anything about it. And one day I'm thinking about like when I was brought up, mom, dad, everybody would talk about what to do when you grow up, kind of like not like you have to be this or that, but like encouraging, right? And like, how do I encourage Ben to
Mm,
what do I encourage him to?
yeah.
And so having a fundamental understanding of where AI is going and how it's going to be utilized, I think it's important to be able to provide that guidance, right? And one of the one of the things is I'm like, how do I do this?
Mhm.
And so like there's a level of curiosity there. And he's so curious by nature right now. And all I do is just enable that, right? And
Yeah.
instead of trying to like I hear some parents like we were at the mall over the holidays, and someone's like, don't touch that. It's gonna do this. And I'm like, and Ben's like, can I push it? And it's like, we're at Somerset Mall, right? With the gigantic things, and there's like they've got a couple of things from the elves that are like floating with helium in it, and he's just like, oh, it's so cool. And I'm like, that's it, right? Like
Mhm.
just that innate curiosity. Just how do you help it thrive?
Yeah, and
So
foster it instead of limit it. Like that's gonna be huge.
one of the challenges that I sort of have been trying to tackle. So like I talked to you about, I wanted to write, right?
Yeah.
And it's the things that I'm learning. I want to share that, and it's more of like I can Google and like look up my own stuff like quickly, right? Like have an index, have something else index my thoughts for me instead of doing
Right.
it personally. But I find that a lot of younger people these days don't want to take the time to learn.
Yeah.
They expect things to be given to them, and I almost feel sorry for some of them who are not curious by nature,
Yeah.
right? In our field, and they're like, how'd you do this? And I'm like, left foot before the
Yep.
right.
Progress. Yeah, yeah.
Right? And Neil's a jerk. He won't give me the answer. And it's like, and it's like, that was the main driver behind writing. And I've been struggling with words because I'm writing from a standpoint of a SME software engineer who's learning a brand new technology or something. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm just missing, right?
Sure.
But I think the approach I'm going to take is it's missing, it's fine. But I think there's a conversation to be had. If someone's curious, I hope that they someday post and ask questions, and we have that conversation.
Yeah.
That sort of because like I've been trying to write and I'm trying to explain every little word. I'm like, this. I'm just never going to finish this. This is just going to take forever. But I think post it, and then if people have questions, we go from there.
Yeah, and I will
Um,
absolutely hook you up with a spot to post all that stuff on Constance, a spot where everybody can come see like what you're putting out in
yeah,
terms of long form, short form, and
yeah.
then yeah, if you ever do spin up that agency where you want to fix vibe coding solutions, like we'll hook you up, man. Honestly, man, like this was a fantastic conversation. We got through a lot around AI, just kind of like the basics, how we're using it every day, and then kind of leaving it off on the point of like, what's the future going to look like? That was just a lot of fun. I love talking to you because you have so many good insights, being technically like on the ground in the trenches, building this stuff every day. So like honestly, thanks so much for hopping on and like chatting with me. This was great.
You bet.
Awesome.
So
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it.
you bet, man. I'll catch you later.